Hi, everyone. I'm just going to give it a moment until we get started. Thank you for joining us today. Hello, and thank you all for joining us today for the third and final part of the three-part end-to-end RAIN RFID Solution Focused webinar series. Unit of Use Traceability with GS1 encoded RAIN RFID for patient safety. Just a brief recap of the prior sessions. In session 1, we introduced the Axia Pilot's 100% traceability with unit of sale tagging. And in session 2, we showed how this enhances distributor efficiency and security. Now today, we focus on unit of use tagging, extending traceability to individual doses for ultimate patient safety. Just a few logistics before we begin. We anticipate the presentation will last approximately 45 minutes, allowing us 15 minutes for questions. Please kindly use the chat box on the control panel on your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Additionally, the call is being recorded and it will be made available to the public following the close of the presentation. On behalf of the RAIN Alliance, I am pleased to introduce you our moderator, Dirk Bratt from CCL eAgile. I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and the RAIN Alliance for hosting. And thank you to those who have joined today's webinar. Hopefully you were able to attend the first two sessions, but in case you missed them, as Elizabeth said, the entire three-part series will be posted to the RAIN Alliance website shortly after the conclusion of today's session. Today, we will be discussing how RAIN RFID with GS1 encoded unit of use tags, each carrying essential data of GTIN, lot, expiry, and serial, ensures end-to-end traceability down to the patient, eliminating reliance on external database lookups that could be costly, slow, and insecure. This is critical for patients who have the most to gain from safe, accurate dispensing, and who ultimately have the most to lose from errors or the use of counterfeit or expired medications. We're excited today to have a representative from Omnicell to share insights on integrating RFID into their enterprise solutions, which are widely used in many hospital medication management systems. We're also pleased to have a very special guest from Fresenius Kabi, who is a pioneer in RFID source tagging, representing one of the first companies in the world to use GS1 standards on RFID-enabled medications and offering them as part of their Plus RFID portfolio for over 5 years. And finally, to add voice to the implementation side of our discussion, we have a leading advocate for RFID in healthcare from CCL eAgile, an industry leader in RAIN RFID technology. So let me introduce today's panelists. First, we have David Berkowitz, Senior Product Manager, Next Generation Solutions at Omnicell. Welcome, David.
Thanks, sir.
We have Gwen Volpe, Senior Director of Medication Technology Partnerships and Strategic Partnerships at Fresenius Kabi. Welcome, Gwen.
Thanks for having me.
On a side note about our first two guests is that both David and Gwen are pharmacists, so it'll be interesting to gather their unique perspective on our discussions today. And finally, we have Aaron Sundman, RFID Business Development Leader at CCL eAgile. Welcome to
Hey, thank you. Hey, and welcome, Gwen and David.
Our anchor for the last 3 sessions. Before we begin, I just want to state that the opinions discussed today are those of the panelists and not of their representative companies. So let's start with our first segment. Our first two in this webinar focused on the Axia pilot and the resulting benefits of RAIN RFID tags carrying all the essential data in an interoperable format and what they could provide to the healthcare supply chain and distribution system. Today, we're going to be coming down from this 30,000-foot view and covering topics from the perspective of the hospitals, pharmacists, caregivers, and the patients. Our first question for today's panel is, what are some of the issues with healthcare and the medication use process in hospitals? Let's start with David.
Thanks, Dirk. How much time do we have here? I'm going to be spitballing for quite a while, so buckle yourselves in. Okay, so a lot of problems. I'm going to list off 4. Let's start with inventory accuracy. So in the pharmacy industry, there's this concept of inventory visibility, which is defined as knowing accurate quantities, knowing lots, knowing expiration dates, knowing form factors, knowing manufacturers. A study was done by 2 of my colleagues, Arlen Ashmore and my other colleague, Jim Stevenson, and they polled some hospitals and got their perspective on like what's their perception of inventory visibility at the hospital. And the overall sentiment was that at the point of care, the visibility is considered partial, which means you don't know accurate inventory, you don't know lots, you don't know expiration dates. I meant to mention this at the beginning, but let me kind of set the stage quickly. So when we think about unit of issue, unit of dose in GS1 and RAIN, we're thinking about an individual tablet, an individual IV vial. We're not talking about that saleable package. The saleable unit RFID is great in like a central pharmacy, but here we're talking about specific implementation at the point of care. So at a nursing unit. So what these experts are saying is that the inventory visibility in nursing units is just partial. So what happens when it's partial? So the problem is that if you don't know your inventory on hand, that means that the drug can stock out and then a nurse isn't there to give them, it doesn't have the medication they need to give a patient who's sick. What hospitals will do to try to fix this is they will have these things called cycle counts and blind countbacks. So they force people to have to count individual pills and vials just to make sure the inventory count is accurate. This is a manual process. No nurse went to nursing school to sit there and count pills and vials. They want to be taking care of patients. Their management want them taking patients. The patients want them at the bedside. They don't want to be sitting there counting tablets. So that's a big workaround that happens. Next issue is because you don't know the lot numbers, if there was a recall, then you don't know where your things are. So at the point of care in the nursing unit, what happens is hospitals buy all kinds of different products from different manufacturers. But what they do is for operational purposes, what they do is they'll mix like a vial, let's say a 1 ml vial of fentanyl with a 1 ml ampule of fentanyl from different manufacturers. And they mix those all together in the same bin because clinically and operationally, they consider those things the same. And what happens is when you put those things together, no one wants to sit there. Let's talk about barcodes for a second. No one wants to sit there and scan every single individual thing when they're putting them into say a medication cabinet. So what happens is you just don't know what individual things are in any given bin, storage bin. And this has other implications. So hospitals also buy products at multiple different prices from multiple different manufacturers. They buy them from multiple different distributors. They buy them from programs called like med shorts where they can buy drugs cheaper. They buy them at what's called different classes of trade. I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but there's this concept in the United States called 340B where you can buy medications at the cheapest possible price. And ultimately, all these things are mixed together. And what happens there? You don't know what your inventory valuation is because you have all these things mixed together and you don't know what you paid for them. So you think about it, what type of business is running their operation without knowing their inventory on hand accurately and not knowing their valuation? So that makes it really challenging to manage your inventory, which again, what happens is then they will send people to do multiple like yearly inventories of all their stuff to figure out what their inventory on hand is. But this, like I said, this can all be changed. And then one last point is on, before I hand it over, because I can go on and on, is expiration dates. So from a patient safety perspective, again, we don't know if you wanted to track the 2D barcodes have expiration dates in them. And by the way, not every unit of issue even has a 2D barcode on it. I think it's probably below 50%. If you wanted to know all your different expiration dates, you can scan every one of those things in, and then you'd have to have a nurse scan every one of those things out to make sure that that record was accurate. Nobody's going to do that. So what we do is you put a representative expiration date in that bin, which is theoretically just the earliest expiration date. But the problem is that those aren't accurate. People aren't good at keeping those up to date. So the problem is that puts patients at risk because they have the possibility of receiving a med that's been expired because it's really hard to keep track of those expiration dates. And also the hospital itself could be at risk if they were ever inspected from a regulatory perspective. I'll hand it over. I'll stop there. I can go on and on, but I'll pass it over to Gwen. But I'm sure you'll circle back with me to how RFID can help.
Yeah, thank you. David gave some great specifics. So, let's take it up a level to look at other challenges that healthcare faces. So the healthcare industry is facing several critical challenges that impact everyone, not just those in the medical field. The challenges I think about are the cost of healthcare, resource constraints, and clinician burnout. Rising healthcare costs are creating immense financial pressure on hospitals and health systems. Hospitals are struggling to keep up as the prices increase on everything from staffing to medical supplies. Some hospitals may have to make difficult choices, like delaying technology upgrades or even cutting back on services. So hospitals are looking for technology that provides efficiencies and cost savings. Hospitals and clinics are often strained for resources like staff, beds, and equipment. This can create long wait times for appointments and surgeries, limiting access to essential care, and could compromise patient safety. So technologies that remove time-consuming processes will keep things running efficiently. And lastly, healthcare professionals, including but not limited to nurses, technicians, pharmacists, doctors, are overworked and under immense pressure. And this widespread clinician burnout leads to mental and physical exhaustion, causing a high turnover of staff and increasing the risk of medical errors. Lack of interoperability, tedious manual processes, time-consuming and repetitive tasks just really add to this burden.
Yeah, I think we all agree. Aaron, I know you're not a pharmacist, but you've been to a pharmacy. You have anything more to add on that?
That's true. I'm not a pharmacist. I've been a patient though, and I've been in the hospital, and this is all these things. You never see that stuff. You never see them counting, all that stuff is behind the scenes, and it's like you see them coming in and out and not realizing that they actually have all of this other stuff to do. And the question that comes up is, what tools have we given them as a society, as a technology group, to make that job easier and to make it more fulfilling? So I'm hoping that in the midst of this, we become that help to be able to do that. And the leaders here, the ones we have here, are the ones that are really pushing that edge forward. So anyway, that's a non-pharmacist position.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think we all do. We just you never realize just how human it is behind the scenes there, that they have to do these manual counts, and everybody has good and bad days at work, so you count on everything going right. But I think that's a good lead into our second segment. Now, Aaron and I might be a little biased on this next topic, as we believe RFID is the answer to all the world's problems. But many of our guests from diverse industries throughout this series have also supported the findings of the Axia study and how RAIN RFID brought benefits and results that would have been very difficult to achieve using other technologies. So we just covered some of the issues, and my next question for our panel is, why is RFID a good solution to these problems? Now, here's one that you can start with, Aaron, as our resident RFID expert.
No, I can do this one. This one I know. No, actually, I guess one way to think about it is, how do you even think about RFID tags? And in some ways, the simplest way is it's just an electronic barcode. It's the same sort of data. You can store more data, but it's the cool part about it isn't just that it's an electronic barcode. It's almost like a magical barcode that can be read through a box in a population of things and return back all of the information in milliseconds. So rather than giving this human this job that is very difficult, memorizing numbers, counting things, all those things are great for computers. That's what they do. That's their best option. They do AI drawings now, but they're not good at that stuff, but they're really good at counting. They're really good at validating. And so this is one of those things that you start to say, if you could just say, hey, you know what? It's the same thing. It's a barcode, but you don't have to open the box. You can read all the items. You can read 100 items at once or 200 items, and it takes seconds. Here's another interesting part. It's not only do you, here's a population of 20. When you're counting it as a human, you'd count to 20 and you'd see 20, right? The next person that counts that same group may just count to 20 again. But with RFID, there is a built-in idea of serialization, which means that you know which 20 you have. So if somebody swapped out 2 of them, The system knows that. As a human reading 20, all you know is that you just read 20. So the systems, once you get into the serialization, once you bring RFID to the table, you have all of this other stuff that comes as a part of a matter of course. And that was one of the big things, is to make it easy to be able to have a system not only validate what we currently do, which is counting, but also validating which and enforcing what I'm going to call FIFO, first expired, first out. That's much simpler when you have a whole population read at once, rather than a person picking up and reading each one. So RFID brings these to the table. And here's the crazy part about this. A lot of these technologies, you actually don't know how they're going to be used until they become ubiquitous. Then you start to see all the other benefits, right? We're only just beginning to see the value of this. Like, imagine all of this coming together, and now AI starts to looking at all this stuff. And yeah, AI is the answer for everything. I realize that. That's probably going to solve everything. No, it's probably going to actually require technology that also gives all the AI the information necessary to do it. So AI is a great way to get into it. And I'm so glad to have the partners here talk about it.
Yeah, very true. Gwen, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
So, I think RAIN RFID can be a complete game changer for accuracy and efficiency in healthcare. And so I think about a few things. I think about compliance and patient safety, for example. And in the US, the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, or DSCSA, requires that end-to-end electronic traceability of pharmaceuticals. And although the barcode's required for this, RAIN RFID can be a powerful tool. So by tagging drug packages, manufacturers can wirelessly track and trace every item as it moves through the supply chain. And this helps prevent counterfeit medications from entering the market and protects patient safety. But there can also be automated traceability with RAIN. With the RAIN RFID tag, it can contain key information like the drug's NDC code, the serial number, lot number, and expiration date. And this data could be automatically captured at each checkpoint, providing a secure, verifiable chain of custody without anyone needing to manually scan a barcode. And this makes recalls faster and more precise. A compromised product, for example, can be instantly located and removed from the supply chain. But I also wanted to add the benefit of improving accuracy and efficiency to reduce or eliminate tedious manual activities. And David will go into more detail about this, and I'll hit it at a high level. Tags on items like medical supplies or pharmaceuticals can be read in bulk instantly and without direct line of sight. And this will eliminate time-consuming, error-prone manual tasks of logging important information like lots and expiration dates over and over again, or not fully entering that data when restocking medications due to sheer volume. Instead of nurses or technicians spending hours counting inventory and supplies, a RAIN RFID system can provide an accurate real-time count in seconds. And this ensures staff always has the right supplies on hand, reducing the risk of stockouts or misplaced equipment. And this enhanced visibility also prevents waste from expired products. And lastly, automated data capture. Every time an item is moved or used, a RAIN RFID system can automatically document it. And this removes the burden of tedious manual data entry. And by automating this process, clinicians are really freed up to focus on what matters most, patient care.
Yeah, let technology do what it does best, and let people do and nurses do what they do best. So, Dave, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, a lot to unpack there, Dirk. Let me rattle off some things, piggyback on what Gwen and expound on what Aaron said. So let's take inventory accuracy for one. So let's imagine you're hopefully you don't want to imagine. Imagine you're in an operating room. You're pretending you're an anesthesiologist. Anesthesiologist, you have this patient sitting there. They're open, they're wide open, they're getting surgery on them. You want to get that patient the drugs as soon as possible, right? You don't want to have to be like using your system to do things. And what happens today is that they have these machines called anesthesia workstation, and the anesthesiologist will go to them, they hold all the drugs, all the supplies, they go over to them, they pull out the drugs, and they just want to grab the drugs, go to the patient and administer the med. Of course, they have to label it properly and prepare it properly, but they just want a really fast workflow. But because they are working at warp speed, the inventory in these cabinets, they don't become accurate. And what happens then is the pharmacy is relying on inventory accuracy in order to restock the anesthesia workstation. And if if they don't restock it, that means there might not be a medication in the anesthesia workstation for a patient that needs it that's currently undergoing an operation. So we have a product that's pre-GA right now. It's called MedTrack OR, and it really enables it works towards enabling that grab and go experience, a more natural workflow. Our anesthesiologist colleagues will really enjoy how it fits into their normal practice. How it functions is that it's RFID based, and it reads what's on the inventory, so that way the pharmacy knows what to stock, and it has an accurate inventory. So that's a solution around like how RFID could make sure that anesthesiologists have exactly what they want when they need it. Gwen mentioned recalls. So in my previous segment, I mentioned that there's no inventory visibility is poor. That includes the lot number. In these bins, there are many different lot numbers mixed in. And no, pharmacies just don't track lot numbers. Like I said, you could, and I really loved, Aaron, your point about how it's just like a barcode, right? Just think about it as a barcode. It's just like a smarter, it's newer technology. It's an advanced barcode. So this would mean that you don't have to scan every little thing to get the lot numbers. Let me give you an example. So if there's different levels of an FDA recall. Recall is when the FDA has determined that there's something wrong with that medication. You don't want to ingest these things that have been recalled. Trust me. So if there's a level 1 recall today, there is almost no way to know if that lot number was given to a patient. What the pharmacy has to do is try to figure out if they purchased it, then they have to figure out where they might have stocked it, and then they kind of have to send a blanket out, letting people know that they may have received it. And a level 1 warning means that there's possibility of serious harm or death from that recalled thing. And the pharmacy is like essentially like blind because they don't know who got what thing. So from a patient perspective, I think it's really valuable to know what thing, and that's ultimately what the FDA wants to get to, but it's not completely regulated right now from a DSCSA perspective. It's regulated to, from the supply chain, but not directly to the patient. But that's kind of what they're implying with their regulation. But that RFID is a nice solution for that. And additionally, like the pharmacy can just query like I have this recall. Where is it now? So I can go quarantine it really fast. And then how can I like quickly figure out who has these, who has received these medications? Let's go to valuation. So I mentioned valuations can be not accurate in real time. They're not perpetually accurate. So what's cool about RFID, and Aaron mentioned this, is the serialization, because you have a serialized thing, you can assign a value to that. So you instantly can improve the accuracy of the valuation. You all in the audience can't see this, but it's kind of amusing for me because I can see all of the head nodding from our panelists, and this is like such confirmation bias, but it's true. Like RFID is there's just not, I thought about all these, if you could tell, I think about these problems all the time, but there's just not a better solution to solving some of these problems than RFID. And then lastly, expiration dates, kind of a no-brainer, right? You can just can query what's expiring, and in real time what's expiring, because that expiration date is embedded within the RAIN GS1 standard. So that will fix that risk of having meds in the bins or going to patients that are expired.
The valuation thing, this is like, I didn't know any of this stuff. I mean, so I'm so glad to be on with you two, because these are the stuff that we learn. Just like every time I get together with Gwen, I learn so much about this and how do we start to solve problems. So David, appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah, my pleasure. Conceptually, I'm speaking conceptually here. Like our product is MedTrack OR and not related to some of these other ways you can implement RFID. But to go out, like let's say 340B, right? 340B is what's interesting about the serialization for me is that 340B, I'll try to explain this in 30 seconds, but how it functions is that you purchase a product at what's called a wholesale acquisition cost, and you're allowed to replace that product at the 340B, the really cheap price, after you've given that drug to a patient who qualifies, where it's a lot more complicated than that, but that's like the fundamentals. But what happens is it's NDC based. So you have to make sure that at the point of administration, you captured that right NDC. So in order to accumulate the things, to rebuy it. So what's cool about RFID is you can compare like what was removed, let's say theoretically out of our MedTrack OR, you can compare what was removed compared to what was actually administered and identify discrepancies between what was, because the clinician might not actually scan. There might be a default that pops up, but you can basically identify margin gaps. So CFOs love to hear that. So essentially what I'm saying is you can do some interesting analysis to make sure you're maximizing your 340B profit.
Wow.
And the data gives you the tools to do so much
Yep.
more. And so Aaron, we were right. RFID does solve all problems. So. Well, with that, we'll move on to our third segment here and discuss the importance of unit of use tagging for patient safety. We've touched on this a little bit in our previous responses, but the Axia pilot achieved 100% traceability at the unit of use or unit of sale level, excuse me. Now, as I stated earlier, we're kind of narrowing down from this high level view of delivering the right drug at the right time to where it'll be administered, to exploring how unit of use RAIN RFID tagging brings benefit to the individual doses, fulfilling what we ultimately wanted to achieve, and that's protecting the patients. So in this segment, let's talk a little bit more about why encoding GS1 essential data, again, the G10 lot expiry serial, directly on the unit of use RFID tags is critical for patient safety. And let's start this time with Gwen.
Well, thanks, Dirk. So to answer this question, let me go back a little bit and give you some background. If you're not familiar with Fresenius Kabi, we're a global healthcare company that specializes in essential medicines and technologies for infusion, transfusion, and clinical nutrition. And we deliver more than 400 million units of injectable medications each year in the US. We have 90 R&D centers and manufacturing facilities all across the globe. So in 2017, imagine our surprise when a few customers started asking us to tag some of our high-use anesthesia-focused medications for use in their RFID system, so they did not have to manually tag it. So as part of our due diligence, we visited hospitals with RFID systems to learn more. We asked automation vendors and customers, what data was crucial to have on the tag? And the vast majority said the same thing. Encode 4 pieces of essential data, the NDC, lot, expiration date, and serial number, which is very similar to what is in a 2D barcode today, and use GS1 standards for ease of use, interoperability, and compatibility. So fast forward a little bit, and in 2020, we released our first product into our new RFID-enabled portfolio using GS1 standards, and now we have 20 RFID-enabled products available with more to come. The amount of source tag products overall on the market is still small, but it's starting to grow. And if a needed item is not available source tagged, the pharmacy will do it themselves. So they'll place a tag on a product, associate the medication's data to that tag, and then find a person to second check the data to ensure it's correct. So by Fresenius Kabi encoding virtually the same data we place in our 2D barcodes on RFID tags during the manufacturing process, we help alleviate this burden for pharmacy. Now, you can have validated data wirelessly straight from the manufacturer, allowing clinicians to focus on patient care instead of the manual tagging process. And this also, which is what's exciting, it allows for the tracking of crucial data by any system, like Omnicell, for example, and the ability for technology vendors to really innovate around RFID.
Yeah, kind of bringing all these systems and letting them talk amongst each other and to get the full value out of this. So David, interested to hear some of your point of view on this, as we've alluded to your cabinets as well.
Thanks, Dirk. Great points, Gwen. So going back to the barcode analogy, when our systems scan barcodes, they're not querying an outside system. So why would it be any different for an RFID tag? If you think about them as equivalent things, why would you need to do that? I love cloud. Cloud is an amazing technology. It's really democratized a lot of technology development, and it's incredible. But you kind of only want to pay for it when you need it, and I don't see why. I just can't think of why you would want to host data just, pay for it if it's just not necessary. It adds extra complexity that's just, like I said, not needed. If you walk through like, how would you even implement a cloud-based system as, like, I guess, a clearinghouse? You would need like, in order for and we want interoperability, right? In order for a system to work, every system to work and talk to each other properly, there's all these manufacturers making these drugs. You would need like some sort of national clearinghouse for all of these things in order to identify what they are. That just, that's expensive to maintain all that. It gets really complex fast. So why bother if all you really need are certain elements, attributes directly on the tag? Another thing I really care about, and that we care about, is system robustness. So our systems are in nursing units, they're in operating rooms. You won't believe this, but sometimes the internet goes out, and there's been cases of malware attacks where hospitals have lost internet for weeks at a time. So now imagine a scenario where we are relying on RFID in order to restock medications at a critical nursing unit. You just wouldn't be able to know what was there, because there's no possible way to query it. You're just sort of flying blind on your inventory. So that's a big thing for me, is because of the location and the criticality of our equipment. It needs to be really, really robust in terms of maintaining, not having degraded functionality when there's internet outages or downtime.
Yeah, I can imagine, I see what happens to a room full of teenagers when the internet goes down. I can't imagine a room full of clinicians when you need to get that medication information, how everybody would freak out. So,
where's my cat videos? I need those.
Exactly. So, Aaron, let's give you an opportunity here.
Well, I think this interesting is the word interoperability, a long word that essentially just means it works everywhere. And it works for everyone, right? You don't need to know something specific. No one else is holding your data. It's interoperable. It means that anybody who starts a company tomorrow can create something that can read this data and can make sense of it. Once that's possible, we're talking edge computing. What I mean by that is the data is held all the way down to the syringe. This is the unit of use right here, right? And anybody who comes along and creates a new system can read and decipher this. That means that everything is more efficient. Now, most of us live in the United States. We see it, and it's already pretty standard. DSCSA is already here. Standards are already there. But this already works when you use GS1 essential data on the tag everywhere around the world. It already works for everything because the standards are the same to be able to read this. So if you don't know where your drug is going to go, if you manufacture something, you want to be able to use standards because you want it to work everywhere. If you're starting to go, you know what, I really want to work on this stuff. I'd love to add new functionality and make the entire healthcare system more efficient. This is how you can do it. This is how you can start to make it happen. The only other thing we can point at right now is eventually AI is going to do it. Right. I mean, that's sort of what the answer is. If there isn't a plan for how to make things more efficient like this, then it's left as an unknown. Right. If you look at the charts for the cost of a healthcare system, it's always up and to the right. It doesn't seem like it's going to go any differently unless we start to figure out a way to make it more efficient and give people, hopefully the healthcare workers, more of what they want to do rather than counting and tagging. And this is what this does as well. It makes it work for everyone. I mean, and so here's the other part. Who would you trust most to put the important information on your drug? I mean, the manufacturer is the one who's manufacturing the drug itself. So that if you're going to have somebody put the data on there, you don't trust somebody else's database that they're hopefully keeping upright and have access to because the internet goes down. But you would trust most likely the manufacturer of the drug itself because they're responsible for the drug, all the components to it, keeping it safe and everything else. So this is why source tagging with unit of use, individual syringes, vials, and tablets is most important and the best way to achieve it, and least error prone and most efficient.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what I was saying. I think that there's a lot that if we talk about the DSCSA and how we, there's different levels of this, right? So you could say, if you talk about unit of use tagging, we also talk about the unit of sale. All of these things align if you use GS1, all the way from manufacturer through DSCSA, pallets, drugs, cases, boxes, all the way down DSCSA. When you jump down to unit of use now, why would you go a different direction? That doesn't make any sense. The government agreed that you need to put the individual information on each data matrix code for unit of sale. That's what we tested with the DSCSA and then, I'm sorry, with the Axia study. And now you go down to unit of use. Let's keep the same pathway, all the data right here, pallet, box, case, drug, all the way down to the individual unit of use, rather than jumping to a whole nother standard, because that splinters the healthcare system and makes things more expensive. So that's why I would push for it.
Yeah.
That's such a salient point there, Aaron. I want to key in on that a little bit because that's what I was alluding to with the 2D barcodes not being on every unit of use. They're only on a small percentage, and that's where the FDA has sort of like stopped making the guidance. But your point is, you don't need FDA guidance to do the right thing, right? So
Yeah, that's it.
You're totally
Right.
right. Like, why would it would make no sense to like have all the standard up into to last mile? Like, why would you do that?
Right. Yeah, when it's the most important, because this is where the errors happen, right? The errors happen right here. They don't happen on the pallet. I mean, yes, they do, but they're caught and they're quarantined or whatever else. But the last moment is when this person, the healthcare worker, has this, and the trust between the individual in front of them, the patient. Let's give them the tools to validate.
Yeah, very, very, very important. I always think of grocery stores, it's the whole kind of breakdown thing, there goes my light. I wasn't moving enough apparently. But that they'll buy a pallet, bring it to their warehouse or ship it, break down that pallet and bring cases to the individual grocery store. And once they put it on the shelf, if everybody kind of ran a different system, it would be complex to use the checkout. Self-checkout would be gone, but if we all had to do different lookups just to find out what type of soup we're buying and how much it was, how complicated that system would be.
Yeah, dogs and cats living together, right? Oh no, that's
exactly mass chaos. Let me take a second here just to remind our audience, if you have any questions, please put that down into the Q&A box there at the bottom, and at the end of our session, we'll get to as many of those as we have time for. But we're going to move on to our final segment, and the final segment of this series. So I think it's only appropriate to take everything we've covered so far and take a look at what's next from what we've learned during the Axia study and what has been covered in today's and our previous webinars. I think we all could agree that unit of use tagging is the future of the pharmaceutical traceability. So similar to our two previous webinars, we concluded with questions around scalability and bringing in the lessons learned to the entire healthcare industry, so all participants can gain the benefits and ultimately we can improve patient safety. So my final question to the panel is, what are the challenges and opportunities for scaling GS1 encoded unit of use RFID tagging across the entire pharmaceutical supply chain? And let's start with David this time.
Yeah, I'm going to continue on the same sort of theme here of interoperability. So if you think about, I have an Apple phone, Gwen might have, I don't know if you have a Google phone, I'm not sure, but if I sent Gwen a photo, she could receive that photo and it just works, right? That's kind of that application standard we need to adopt, which is essentially what we're here today espousing, is that we want the industry to adopt the GS1 standard. I think also we need more, it's a sort of chicken or the egg problem. We need more read points along the supply chain. We need more technology that is there that can be utilized to take advantage of the RFID. The question was on the entire supply chain, right? So the entire supply chain also includes things like tablets. At the end of the day, there's a lot of physics involved in this. It's not as like, it is more than, we talk about it like, oh, it's just going to work. It's just not really that simple. So when I think about, say, scaling to tablets, and many tablets are blister packed in foil. That worries me at the end of the day, because you don't want to have the foil can interrupt the wavelengths of the RFID. And so generally, I think we need to solve that, and also we need more experience with lots of different products. Some things are just easier to tag than others. So I think the more experience we have with that, the easier it'll be to scale.
Yeah, I like to hear Aaron's side to this from the RFID tech side.
Yeah, I think that from a challenge perspective, I mean, there's a lot that comes along. One is that it pretty much has to be done at the manufacturer. So if you're going to have the entire supply chain get the benefit, it's got to be done as early as possible, right? That way it allows every person along, every group along the way to receive benefit. It's also, again, like I said before, it's also where you'd want it to be happening, because they're the ones you trust most. They're the actually manufactured the drug if you have somebody else do it. Now, there is this possibility of midstream tagging and there's other things that allows for someone to come in the middle and validate and do all that. But at this point, we're trying to figure out what are the challenges. Well, that's one of the other is like when you have an RFID tag right up against the drug, you have to think about the dielectric properties of the medicine itself and how that impacts. You can't just take an RFID tag off the shelf somewhere that worked well with hang tags for clothing and put it on your medicine and disappearing medicine and have it just work, right? It doesn't work like that. So they got sodium bicarbonate, a lot of these other ones that just. So what happens? A lot of it is it will either absorb the electric energy, or it'll push it back out. And either way, you've got to build the RFID tag so that it works with the drug and not just as if it were on free air. So that's one of the challenges is it isn't easy. You want to have experienced groups working with you to make it so it works in every situation. If you just think it's going to just put something random on there and it's going to work just fine, it doesn't quite work that well. As well as I was talking to one anesthesiologist at the ASHP show, and he was talking about how he would have a bunch of vials, and he put it in a fanny pack, and he would run through the hospital, bouncing around, right? So if you're doing that, you have to have a silicon chip on there with the RFID. You're going to want to make sure you're protecting it. So it's not just one of those things where you just put the chip on there and everything's going to be fine. There's stuff on it. So you want to work with experienced systems and companies that have done this before. Also, I have to say, since we're using standards, GS1, anybody can join doing this. I don't think we can actually, as a company, scale up to be able to do everything. We need more people to be looking at this and adopting it across the healthcare industry, across everywhere, because otherwise it's just not going to reach the need. You're still going to have people tagging, putting little fingers. So please, everyone who's considering this is already working. This technology has been proven from the DSCSA validation side with the unit of sale, as well as down to unit of use, vials and syringes. All of this is functioning right now. So let's say there's challenges out there, but really it's getting people to realize this is going to add value to everyone and every patient and eventually across the world.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to hear, Gwen, do you have some interesting thoughts on this?
I do. Thank you, Dirk. There's such an opportunity for pinpoint accuracy using RAIN RFID, digital visibility, which David talks a lot about. So imagine if all controlled substances were RFID enabled. These products are mandated to be accounted for at all times during their journey from the pharmaceutical company to the patient. They're meticulously counted. So instead of scanning every product for an accurate count at many points in the process, you can scan once at each point wirelessly. Imagine the time savings for pharma, the wholesalers, pharmacy, and nursing. The amount of counting that goes on could be, virtually eliminated. I think about all the time spent by nurses who are required to keep accurate counts of these controlled substances. Every time they need to pull a controlled substance for patient care, they have to keep the count accurate. Mistakes happen, counts are off, and then nursing and pharmacy has to reconcile to keep these counts accurate from a compliance standpoint. So now add up all those minutes and hours they spend that could be utilized to take care of patients instead. So these are opportunities that really excite me about RFID. And I'm also looking forward to the conclusion of the Axia pilot, where they show the results of studying the use of RFID from plant to patient. And Bahar and her team have already seen some amazing statistics, like 100%, accuracy. It's really amazing. And lastly, I just want to let all the technology and solution providers listening in today to know that, you can help solve problems that have been plaguing hospitals and healthcare for decades using RAIN RFID. And I encourage you to visit your local hospital. They would be more than happy to show you where they struggle, what they would love to see alleviated. Manual tasks of counting, finding items, documentation that could be drastically reduced or maybe even eliminated with RAIN RFID. Giving clinicians back time for what they're passionate about, which is, taking care of their patients.
Yeah, I don't suspect a lot of college people going into this field are going, boy, I can't wait to count things over and over and over again.
Exactly.
And be held accountable for that as well. So, but no, I appreciate all your insights, and it looks like we do have some time here to take a few questions from our audience today. And I'm going to start with the first one that came in here, and says, in the push for RFID adoption across the pharmaceutical supply chain, who holds the most influence? Manufacturers, distributors, or hospitals? Additionally, in the case of source tagging, which stakeholders are most likely to absorb the associated costs? I'll throw that out to the group. Whoever wants to take it.
This is my perspective. I generally believe that this might not be accurate, but I generally believe companies listen to their customers. So I would think that hospitals have the most influence in terms of adoption of RFID. I would think that they would just need to go to their distributors or to various pharma and ask for it. So I think them expressing demand, I think, is the right way. And in terms of the costs, that will definitely be passed off to the customer at some point back to the hospital, which is why I'm not totally convinced RFID is the best implementation for every type of drug right away. I do believe, I can't read the future, but I believe with economies of scale, the tags are already inexpensive. But I think that if we see a major bloom in adoption, that the tag prices will just even come down more to the point of them being like cost being infinitesimal. But initially, I would think that those costs would be passed on. Ideally, I do think I'm optimistic that they will be very reasonable prices for these tags.
Yeah, I agree with you on that about the hospitals. I mean, so let's just say, Aaron's favorite world where everything gets tagged with RFID. It's not going to do any good unless the hospitals have systems. Like, that's great. You put all this RFID stuff on there. You need those people to want it and then to adopt it. So it's that chicken and egg thing. We could do all the stuff and have the best technology, but if it's not being used, then you didn't add anything. You didn't add any value. So they need to reach out and say, yeah, we want to do this because we want our staff to be, I guess, just have a better quality of life in their job, as well as more patient safety. And then it has to be done by the people upstream. The distributors, the manufacturers, the technology companies need to actually enable it. So it is definitely one of those weird things where they're the most important, the hospital is most important because they need to, adopt it. But if somebody else has to do it, and make it. So it's a little bit of a a target that's being missed there. But I agree with David.
Yeah. And we got a question here. What's going to drive more pharmaceutical manufacturers to do source tagging of medication? Gwen, would you like to take a swing at that?
Sure. We know that clinicians see the value in RFID, and they're very vocal about where they'd like to see it. And it's really now up to technology vendors to place RFID readers where clinicians want them. And this is kind of driving a lot of this. They would like to see them in automated dispensing cabinets, in IV technology, central pharmacy automation, narcotic vaults. Forward-thinking vendors are not waiting for pharma to put a RFID tag on every single item before they jump in. They're jumping in now. And, more pharma companies are looking to tag, more automation vendors are coming out with RFID-enabled technology. So I think it's a very exciting time for RAIN RFID, and I'm really curious to see what's next.
I think we're all interested to kind of see the next steps here as this kind of starts to reach a tipping point here in the industry where people are hearing enough about it, and you know, everybody wants a new technology. Nobody wants to be first, which I've said in a few of our seminars here. So, you know, once you start,
I mean, look how amazing Fresenius Kabi is. 5 years ago, they started doing this because they saw the future and they wanted the benefits to everyone along the way, rather than everyone getting stuck. You know, so I think that pathway, that effort is really paid off. And I mean, we have talked to other companies recently, and there has been this, you know, some reticence periodically when they hear about other companies who want them to follow a particular lookup system rather than using, you know, and then once the healthcare system starts to splinter like that, people get afraid of moving forward. Right. Fresenius Kabi is really one who said, you know what, we're going to do this because we care about the entire industry and the efficiency there. So this is the part that we got to keep pushing forward to. And I don't know how to get pharmaceutical manufacturers to do more source tagging, knowing and believing that longer term, this is the way to go. And this is what this is showing today.
Yeah, and just to touch on there, you know, there's a question out there about other companies moving to this, and you know, they're definitely seeing the interest from other companies out there, and I don't think Fresenius Kabi is going to be alone on this as everybody starts to see the benefits and what's coming around.
Yeah, ASHP last year, Pfizer announced that they were. We don't really have much data on that, but they had a big board that said it, and we asked the people and they didn't know what was going on with it. But so it's true, these large other companies are getting involved.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be very isolated. So
Yeah, I also believe J&J actually has been tagging for quite a while now. I sit on a committee with a few folks from J&J, and they're always talking about RFID, so they're very interested in it as well.
Yeah. Well, we're down to our last few minutes, so let's take an opportunity here to summarize some of our key takeaways from our discussion today. I just have a quick one, and I'll let our panelists kind of work on theirs, so hopefully we can add a couple more. But, you know, when I see unit of use tagging extends, you know, what we talked about in the Axia pilots, 100% traceability down to the individual doses. And this is scalable, it's high performing, and it's going to assist the caregivers, help make their job easier, help them focus on what they do. And bottom line, as always, it's going to, you know, help protect the patients. So, you know, they're getting, you know, their right dose at the right time, and, you know, getting everything that they expect. Because I stated earlier, you know, in like seminar 1, I'm clueless, and I'm not a guy that's going to, you know, ask what they're injecting in me. It's like, is that the right stuff? Is that not expired? You know, can you double check that for me? We just, you know, we assume all this is taken care of behind the scenes. And from what we see, it is processes, but it's very complicated. So, you know, I kind of look forward to having this all integrated into the, you know, the systems that we've proven out here in our discussions. So, any other takeaway points from our panelists today?
Well, I would say one of the things is that the technology works now. It's already been proven, right? And we, with the Axia study we met with the at the HDA conference, the Healthcare Distribution Alliance, and we showed every one of the people there, including the FDA, how with unit of sale. So this is pallet boxes that they can implement basically the spirit of the law of DSCSA. Kind of going back to what David said earlier, the DSCSA doesn't actually touch unit of use. It also doesn't touch RFID at all. But if back when 2013, when this was written, RFID worked like it does now, they would have gone with it. I mean, and the reason why is because you don't have to open up any boxes. Right. You don't have to, there's no question that you're reading the right thing and validating the serial numbers of every single one through unit of sale, now down to unit of use. DSCSA doesn't touch unit of use, but this is where, if you're looking at where it really matters, it goes down to the patient, the point of care. And so the interesting side about that too is, where does it go after that? So now we're talking about the future of RFID. So we talked about unit of sale, unit of use, but we didn't really talk about point of care. Like, how does somebody be able to actually, if you had an RFID tag on your syringe and vial as a nurse or a clinician, could you just have something at bedside that could validate that this was correct? And it did look all the way back. You could start to say, yeah, we're doing all the way from manufacturer through distribution to the hospital, through the validation, all the way down to point of care. And you don't have to sit there and try and read it and check it. You don't, I mean, how in the heck could somebody look at the lot code on their syringe and go, let me just check to see if that's recalled? I mean, that's ludicrous to think that would be something, but it's trivial if you build it into the workflow, the process at point of care, to give the individual clinician the ability to tap or just hold it over something and do a quick validation, take 2 seconds. Then let me take it a little bit further, because I want to just go all the way through, right? So is to say, well, what about people at home? They're not going to have an RFID reading cabinet. So you could give them something like this, a dual frequency, like EM Micro allows for the ability to have something that uses RAIN RFID inside cabinets, inside validated all the way through, serialized, all that. But then when you get home, if it gets there and you just tap your phone against it, now it's validating in real time for an individual to be able to check for themselves without 40,000, 100,000, 2,000, whatever the number of cost of a cabinet would be. It already works with your phone. The phone already works to do that kind of thing. So now we're saying, let's go all the way end to end, future focused validation for the patient. This is where we can end up, is if we are actually working for something that solves these problems, we can get there.
If I can get past my Midwestern nice and just tap my phone to it and have these questions answered, that would
right.
be great.
Phone has NFC. NFC
Yeah.
is a subset, has a subset of RFID.
Yeah. If I can validate what I'm taking, or I can mark it down that, if I'm doing, a pilot study on a new drug, when I'm taking it, that I'm taking it. There's a lot of tools behind the scenes for that as well. So
I'll say the other thing I didn't mention as well is it not only does it give you information like instructions for use and stuff like that, you can also validate that this is the authentic product. The newer chips have the ability to have a cryptographic authentication signature for every single tap. That means you're not only validating that's the right medicine, but it's the actual one from the manufacturer. So this is the kind of thing that says, okay, before you, take this drug, just tap your phone against it. It takes 3 seconds. Do the validation. The company gets information about what is being used where, which doses are being used. You get information as the user about what you have and to verify that it's an authentic product before taking it.
Yeah. That seems to be where the future of healthcare is going, enabling the patients to make their decisions, to give them the data so that they can become involved with the process. And what a great way to become involved with something that everybody's got in their pocket or in their purse, which is their cell phone. So, but let's take our last couple minutes just to kind of wrap things up today. Just wanted to note that if anybody would like to see the full Axia report, that is available at axia.msu.edu under the Pharma End-to-End RFID pilot. And all 3 of these webinars will be posted to the RAIN Alliance website, so you can tune in and rewatch them or share them with your colleagues. And at this time, I would again like to thank our guest, David Berkowitz from Omnicell. Thank you. And Gwen Volpe from Fresenius Kabi, thank you.
Thank you.
And Aaron Sundman from CCL eAgile, thank you.
Absolutely.
As well as, everybody who joined the webinar today and everybody who joined our first 2 webinars, we appreciate your time. And I am now going to send this back to Elizabeth at RAIN for any last minute housekeeping. Elizabeth?
Thanks, Dirk. I think you covered everything. I just wanted to reiterate the recordings for all 3 sessions will be made available on the RAIN Alliance website. Otherwise, I have no other things. Thanks everyone for a great webinar series, very informative. And thank you for everyone who attended. Nothing else from my end. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks for hosting.